Tonight, we explore a realm that has mystified scholars, archaeologists, and scientists for centuries. The strange world of ancient inscriptions and symbols science still can't explain. From cryptic stone carvings that defy translation to symbols etched into mountainsides with no known origin, these mysterious marks have sparked questions humanity has yet to answer. So before you get too comfortable, as always, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel only if you enjoy our content. Let us know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Sometimes our stories are just too interesting, and we're working on some boring ones too, but not tonight. It's time now to dim the lights. Turn on a fan for some gentle noise. And together, let's uncover the ancient signs that whisper across time. In the quiet waters of the Taunton River, Massachusetts, rests a large, oddly shaped boulder. At first glance, it might seem like any other natural stone, weathered by time, worn by water, a forgotten piece of the Earth's puzzle. But as you get closer, something begins to shift. Etched into its surface are lines, loops, arrows, and symbols, so carefully inscribed they look deliberate, intelligent, even purposeful. This is Dighton Rock, a 40-ton mystery that has baffled scientists, historians, and cryptographers for nearly 400 years. The markings across its face are neither random scratches nor erosion. They were carved by hand, by someone. But who? And more importantly, why? Some claim Native Americans were the authors, using it to record ancient myths or significant celestial events. Others believe Norse explorers, perhaps even Leif Erikson himself, left behind this coded message long before Columbus ever set sail. One theory goes even further, proposing that the lost tribes of Israel journeyed across the ocean and used the rock as a sacred marker. And then, of course, there are whispers of something even stranger, something not entirely human. What deepens the mystery is the rock's language, or rather, the lack of one. No known script matches the carvings. Linguists have failed to find a consistent pattern. The symbols resemble no singular writing system, yet they radiate intention. They look like they mean something, but no one to this day can tell you exactly what. Over time, the rock has been studied, relocated, even sealed behind glass in a small museum to preserve its strange writings. Yet despite all the scrutiny and theories, Dighton Rock refuses to speak clearly. It sits silently, as if guarding a secret from a time we've long forgotten, or perhaps a time that hasn't come yet. Some say the message isn't meant for us. Others think we've simply lost the key. But one thing is certain, this stone was never meant to be just a rock. It was carved to endure, to outlast, to one day be understood. Maybe tonight, you're one step closer to doing just that. If Dighton Rock could speak, what story would it tell? Over the centuries, countless voices have tried to answer that question, each offering their own interpretation, each certain that they hold the truth. Yet with every new theory, the mystery only deepens. In 1680, Reverend John Danforth made one of the earliest drawings of the rock's carvings. He believed the markings were the work of Native Americans, possibly chronicling battles, religious visions, or astronomical knowledge passed down through generations. Others, studying the symbols from a European lens, insisted they were the runes of ancient Norse travelers, Vikings who sailed westward across the Atlantic, carving their presence into the continent long before history recorded it. Then came the Portuguese theory. In the 1800s, Portuguese-American scholars pointed to one peculiar set of shapes they claimed resembled the coat of arms of Miguel Corte Real, a nobleman who vanished during an expedition to North America in 1502. Could the rock be a grave marker, a sign of conquest? A cry for help lost to time? Even as academics debated these competing narratives, alternative researchers stepped forward with bolder claims. Some said the markings held Atlantean origins, evidence of a pre-flood civilization far more advanced than we imagine. Others believed the carvings were a kind of celestial code, meant to align with constellations, planetary cycles, or even signals from extraterrestrial intelligence. And yet, through all the voices, none can fully explain what's written. No story fits all the lines. No language captures every curve. Scholars and skeptics alike agree on one unsettling point. Something is missing. A piece of the puzzle, a cipher, a key that has either been lost to time or never existed at all. Some have even suggested the carvings are intentionally ambiguous. Perhaps the creators wanted us to argue, to wonder, to search. Maybe the stone wasn't meant to be read at all, but felt. A test of awareness, a reflection of our hunger for meaning where none is given. As more visitors gaze upon Dighton Rock and more interpretations emerge, we are left with a strange irony. In trying to make the stone speak, we've only projected our own voices onto it. And still, it says nothing. But the silence? That might be the most haunting part of all. Tucked deep inside Yale University's Beinecke Rare Book Library lies an artifact that defies understanding. A book so strange, so singular, that it has resisted every effort to decode it. Known as the Voynich Manuscript, it is a bound volume of roughly 240 vellum pages, written in an unknown language that no one on Earth, not even AI, has ever successfully deciphered. It looks like a book. It reads like a book, but it refuses to behave like one. The pages are filled with flowing lines of script, neither Latin, nor Greek, nor Arabic. The letters are curvy, clean and consistent, as if written by a practiced hand. But no script in recorded human history matches it. And as if the writing wasn't mysterious enough, the manuscript is also filled with surreal illustrations. Plants that don't exist, zodiac wheels that twist in unfamiliar ways, and strange nude women bathing in pools connected by tubes and stars. It feels alien, but not necessarily from outer space. More like a glimpse into a world that runs parallel to ours. One with its own biology, its own medicine, its own logic. Discovered in 1912 by rare book dealer Wilfrid Voynich, the manuscript has since passed through the hands of some of history's most brilliant minds, including military codebreakers and expert linguists. During World War II, US and British cryptanalysts tried to decode it. All failed. In recent years, advanced computer models have tried their best, searching for patterns, linguistic rules, anything. And still, nothing. Not a single word has been translated. Some have suggested the manuscript is an elaborate hoax, written in gibberish to sell as a curiosity. But if that's true, then the hoaxer was a genius. The text follows consistent grammar-like patterns. It has structure. It has flow. Even the fake plants are drawn with botanical precision, down to the roots and stems. So if it's not fake, then what is it? A lost language? A magical grimoire? A hallucination turned into ink? No one knows. But here's what's most unsettling. Despite every tool modern science has thrown at it, the Voynich manuscript still sits in its glass case, daring us to understand. And failing that, daring us to wonder, because some books don't want to be read. Some books want to be remembered. In the age of artificial intelligence, where machines can beat chess champions, compose music, and even mimic human voices, one strange book has remained impenetrable. The Voynich Manuscript. Despite hundreds of years of study, modern cryptographers eventually turned to machine learning for answers. With vast computing power and pattern recognition skills far beyond human capability, it seemed inevitable that AI would solve what mankind could not. And yet, it didn't. Algorithms scanned the Voynich's pages, analyzing symbol frequencies, repetition, and possible linguistic patterns. Several AI programs even tried comparing the text against over 400 known languages. Nothing matched. One program suggested it might be a rare dialect of Hebrew. Another guessed it was related to medieval Turkish. But each time, the theory fell apart under scrutiny. One AI model even tried to translate the text, assigning modern English words to the symbols, hoping something would click. What came out? Gibberish. Disjointed sentences with no context, as if the manuscript was teasing us, feeding us fragments of meaning just to keep us staring. But what if the problem isn't the algorithm? What if the book was never meant to be understood by machines? Some researchers now believe the manuscript may not follow human linguistic logic at all. They suggest it could be a constructed language, a kind of mental maze meant to confuse the reader on purpose, a puzzle not to be solved, but to be experienced. Others go even further, proposing that the script was created by someone in an altered state, visions captured during dreams, hallucinations, or deep trance. A language not of the waking world, but of the subconscious. If that's true, it's no wonder our machines fail. They operate in logic, and the Voynich Manuscript might be a product of intuition, emotion, or madness. Here's a chilling thought. What if the text isn't meant for us at all? What if it was written for a different species, a different world, or a different time? Something ancient watching, or something still to come. AI can read stock markets, faces, and languages, but it cannot read this. The Voynich Manuscript remains untouched by code and unsolved by power. A reminder, perhaps, that some mysteries aren't made to be broken by force, only unraveled by wonder. In a quiet field near Glasgow, Scotland, a massive slab of rock lies half buried beneath the soil, flat, ancient, and sprawling like the foundation of a forgotten temple. Locals call it the Cochno Stone. Discovered in 1887, this enormous sandstone surface spans over 40 feet in length and is covered with a dizzying network of carvings. Spirals, concentric circles, cup marks, and grooves stretch from one edge to the other, more than 90 separate symbols, all painstakingly etched into the rock long before written history ever began in the British Isles. They aren't random, that's what makes it eerie. The spirals are too symmetrical, the grooves too intentional. Some circles are connected by channels, as if representing rivers, or energy, or movement of something we no longer understand. At first glance, it looks like a sacred map. But of what? Historians call them cup and ring marks, and similar patterns have been found all across Europe, from Ireland to northern Spain, even as far as Italy and the Alps. But the Cochno Stone is the largest, most intricate version ever found, and the meaning still unknown. Some theorists suggest the symbols represent ancient star charts, mapping constellations from a prehistoric sky. Others believe they chart the movement of water, possibly guiding local tribes to springs, rivers, or underground currents. A few have dared to suggest the symbols represent portals, pathways between the physical and the spiritual world. But here's the strange part. Despite being studied for more than a century, no one has been able to confirm its purpose. There's no accompanying text, no tools left behind, no bones, no altars, no explanation, just the carvings and silence. In 1965, fearing vandalism, archaeologists made a radical decision. They reburied the Cochno Stone. Yes, they buried one of Europe's largest and most mysterious artifacts, on purpose. Not to hide it, but to protect it from curious hands that might do more harm than good. The stone slept in the earth for over 50 years. Then in 2016, it was briefly unearthed again. But still, the symbols offered no answers, just more questions. Who carved it? What did it mean to them? And why did they leave no other trace? The Cochno Stone speaks in spirals, but what it's saying, we've yet to translate. Look closer at the spirals on the Cochno Stone, and a strange pattern begins to emerge, one that has stirred whispers for decades. Some say these aren't just shapes. They're not just prehistoric doodles or ceremonial art, or even maps. They might be messages from the sky. Many of the carvings align with known astronomical events, solstices, equinoxes, lunar cycles. When viewed from above, the entire stone resembles a kind of celestial chart, tracking the movement of stars and planets. Not only that, but some of the spiral patterns echo those found in crop circles. Modern phenomena also tied, at least in theory, to extraterrestrial contact. Is it a coincidence or something more? Alternative researchers believe the Cochno Stone could be one of the oldest star maps on Earth, a prehistoric observatory etched in stone. They point to the mathematical precision of the spirals, the directional alignment of certain grooves, and the fact that the site was likely used for rituals and gatherings thousands of years ago. But there's an even bolder theory. What if the symbols didn't come from humans at all? Some suggest the carvings could have been inspired, guided even, by visitors from elsewhere. Not gods in the mythological sense, but beings from beyond our world. Ancient astronaut theorists argue that the symbols resemble those seen in other mysterious sites, the petroglyphs of Valcamonica, the Nazca lines in Peru, and even strange markings found in Australia's Gosford glyphs. In all of these places, the story is the same. Ancient carvings, strange symbols, no written language to explain them. And a consistent theme, they make more sense when viewed from above. Who were these messages for? Not for farmers, not for local villagers, not for passing tribes, but for something in the sky. It's an idea dismissed by mainstream archaeology, and yet no conventional theory has fully explained the purpose or meaning of the Cochno Stone's intricate designs. Maybe we're not supposed to know yet, maybe we're not looking from the right angle, or maybe we're still waiting for someone or something to return and read it, because when symbols are only understood from the heavens, you have to ask, who was watching from above? In 1965, something strange happened in the quiet town of Clydebank, Scotland. Without fanfare or ceremony, a group of archaeologists and local officials gathered around the Cochno Stone, not to study it, not to protect it in a museum, but to bury it. Yes, they buried one of the largest, most enigmatic stone carvings in Europe under a thick layer of soil, concrete, and silence. The official reason? Vandalism. By the mid-20th century, the Cochno Stone had become a local curiosity. People visited the site often, carving initials into its surface, walking across the symbols, damaging the ancient grooves with each passing year. Authorities feared the damage would grow worse, and so, in a decision that still baffles historians today, they covered the entire 40-foot stone slab to preserve it, by hiding it away. But what if that wasn't the only reason? Some believe the burial was more than just a protective act, that it was a kind of intellectual suppression, a quiet way to remove a puzzle no one wanted to deal with. After all, the Cochno Stone raised too many uncomfortable questions. Questions that traditional archaeology couldn't answer. Questions about its age, its meaning, its builders, and the disturbing similarities to carvings found in other ancient sites across the world. Could the stone be evidence of a forgotten civilization? Or worse, an unwanted connection between ancient humans and something not of this earth? By burying it, the mystery was, at least temporarily, buried with it. For over 50 years, the Cochno Stone remained hidden beneath the earth, as if the world had collectively decided to forget it existed. But in 2016, archaeologists from the University of Glasgow began the careful process of unearthing it again. For a brief time, it was exposed to the light of day, and to a new generation of researchers, theorists, and dreamers. Yet even then, no new answers were found, only more detail, more lines, more spirals, more silence. Then, once again, it was reburied, almost as if the world wasn't ready. Some mysteries, it seems, are destined to remain just below the surface, not lost, just waiting. High in the rugged mountains of the Bayan Kara Ula range, near the border of China and Tibet, a group of Chinese archaeologists stumbled upon something strange in 1938. It wasn't a temple, it wasn't a burial, it was a cave. Inside, scattered across the stone floor like forgotten coins, were hundreds of circular discs, each roughly 9 inches wide, with a perfectly cut hole in the center, and grooves spiraling outward like the grooves on a vinyl record. But these weren't for music. They were later named the Dropa stones, and unlike anything ever found before or since. The grooves on the stones weren't just decorative. Upon closer examination, they were discovered to be tiny, almost microscopic symbols, carved with an intricacy far beyond what was thought possible for the region and time. The initial reaction from the scientific community? Confusion, followed by silence. No known civilization in that area had ever created anything like it. Then came the translation. According to accounts, most notably from a now disputed professor named Sum Umnui, the symbols told a story. A story of a small group of beings who crash-landed in the mountains thousands of years ago. They weren't gods, they weren't spirits. They were travelers from another star. The beings called the Dropa found themselves stranded on Earth. They tried to communicate with the local tribes. At first they were misunderstood, feared, attacked. But over time, they coexisted, sharing knowledge, surviving, eventually dying there. Their memory sealed in stone. Of course, the mainstream scientific world dismissed the tale. The translation was never officially verified. The Dropa stones disappeared from public view. Some claimed they were moved, others said they never existed. The story fell into the realm of fringe theory, discussed only in late-night radio shows and UFO documentaries. But eyewitnesses swear the stones were real, and the few photographs that exist show them. Thin, circular discs with spiral engravings, unlike any known artifact. So the question remains, were the Dropa stones ancient records from a lost civilization, or deliberate fiction? And if they were fiction, why would someone go to such extraordinary lengths to create so many of them? Maybe they weren't just telling a story, maybe they were leaving behind a warning. What happens when the story sounds too unbelievable to be true, but also too detailed to be made up? That's the riddle behind the Dropa tale, the alleged translation of the mysterious spiral-etched discs found in the remote caves of Bayan Karaula. According to Professor Sumumnui, who reportedly studied the Dropa stones in the late 1960s, the tiny grooves carved into the discs weren't just random. They were a form of microscopic writing, etched with such precision that only magnification could reveal the meaning. The translation? Nothing short of extraordinary. It described a group of beings, the Dropa, who came from a distant planet near Sirius. Their craft malfunctioned and crash-landed in the high-altitude mountains thousands of years ago. They couldn't leave. They were stranded, with no way home. The story went on. The Dropa encountered a local tribe living in the caves, primitive by comparison, fearful of the newcomers. At first, there was conflict. But in time, understanding followed. The Dropa weren't gods, and they weren't hostile. They were just lost travelers, trying to survive in a world that wasn't theirs. The discs allegedly told of their attempt to adapt to Earth's gravity, the illnesses they suffered, the dwindling numbers, and how some of them eventually interbred with the locals, leaving behind a hybrid legacy. Skeptics dismiss the story as science fiction disguised as archaeology. The translation has never been peer-reviewed. No official copies of the Dropa stones remain in public museums. And yet, the tale won't go away. Even more curiously, anthropologists working in the region have noted reports of an isolated tribe in the area known as the Dropka, a people of unusually short stature, with disproportionately large heads, sparse body hair, and unique genetic markers. To this day, their origin remains a subject of debate. Coincidence or something more? If the story was fake, why was it buried so quietly? Why were the stones hidden, the researchers discredited, the physical evidence removed from public access? And if the story was true, then that means we are not alone, and we never were. Maybe the Dropa didn't just leave behind a story, maybe they left behind descendants, watching, waiting, and wondering if we're finally ready to believe them. If history teaches us anything, it's this. Not all discoveries are welcomed. The story of the Dropa stones didn't just fade away, it was erased, quietly, systematically. Following the alleged translation of the discs in the 1960s, Professor Tsum Umnui faced overwhelming skepticism. His work was dismissed. His papers were reportedly confiscated. Soon after, he disappeared from public record entirely. Today, there's almost no trace of him in academic databases, as if he'd never existed at all. The same fate awaited the Dropa stones. Once photographed, documented, and reported by several visitors, including Austrian engineer Ernst Wegerer, who claimed to have seen them on display at the Bampo Museum in China, they were eventually removed. Wegerer even took 2 photographs, which still circulate online. The images show round stone discs with clean, carved grooves radiating from the center, just as the descriptions claimed. But when researchers later returned to the museum to investigate, the stones were gone. Staff denied any knowledge of them. No display, no records, no comment. It was as if the entire chapter of history had been wiped clean. And here's where the mystery deepens. Over the years, multiple independent researchers and journalists attempted to trace the stones. Some believe they were relocated to hidden archives. Others suspect they were destroyed, deemed too controversial, too disruptive. There are even whispers that the Chinese government classified the discovery, fearing what the implications might mean, because if the Dropa stones are real, they challenge everything. They challenge the story of human isolation, of technological progress, of being alone in the universe. They suggest we've been visited, not recently, but long, long ago. If true, then the Dropa didn't just crash into a mountainside, they collided with our understanding of history. And someone, somewhere, might not want that story told. Erasing a discovery doesn't make it less real. It just makes it harder to trace. And sometimes the very effort to erase something makes it all the more suspicious. So ask yourself, what kind of truth gets hidden this carefully? Maybe the Dropa stones weren't lost. Maybe they were buried, just like the Cochno Stone, until the world is ready to dig deeper. In 1908, deep beneath the ruins of a Minoan palace on the island of Crete, archaeologists uncovered something truly bizarre. It wasn't a weapon, it wasn't a tool, it was a disc, hand-sized, made of fired clay, circular, and perfectly symmetrical. They called it the Phaistos Disc. At first glance, it seems almost decorative. Its surface is covered in a spiral of stamped symbols, 241 in total, arranged in a clockwise motion from the edge to the center. But look closer and you'll realize something unsettling. These symbols do not match any known alphabet, language, or writing system. They are utterly unique. Some depict human-like figures in motion. Others resemble feathers, fish, tools, plants, or stars. All were pressed into the clay using small stamps, suggesting a kind of printing technology previously unknown in the ancient world. In fact, the Phaistos Disc is often called the first example of movable type in human history. And yet, we have no idea what it says. Despite decades of study, the language remains undeciphered. It's not linear A, not linear B, not Greek, Egyptian, or Sumerian. It appears to be a one-time script, a language that left behind no other trace. Just this single artifact, just this single message. No context, no translation, no second example. Theories abound. Some believe it's a religious hymn or ritual prayer. Others think it's a calendar, a legal decree, or even a children's game. And then there are the more fringe ideas. Claims that it may be extraterrestrial in origin, or a relic from a lost civilization. Perhaps even Atlantis. But here's the part that haunts scholars the most. Whoever made the Phaistos Disc had the technology to stamp symbols with uniformity. They had a system, a plan. This wasn't random carving, it was deliberate communication. And yet, the message is locked, like a phone with no passcode. A letter written in a language the world forgot, or never knew. There's nothing else like it. No matching symbols, no follow-up discovery. It sits alone in the Heraklion Museum, quiet and unresolved, as if waiting for someone who speaks its tongue to finally arrive. What language dies after only one message? And what kind of message is so important it was pressed into eternity? What makes the Phaistos Disc more than just a puzzling artifact is not simply its strange language or its perfect symmetry, it's the silence that surrounds it. Archaeologists have scoured Minoan ruins, surrounding islands, and neighboring civilizations for even a whisper of the same symbols. But none have ever been found. Not scratched into pottery, not painted on frescoes, not inscribed on tombs or scrolls. Just one disc, one moment in history, one unsolved sentence. This has led to an uncomfortable possibility. What if the Phaistos Disc isn't from Crete at all? Some researchers suggest it may have come from elsewhere entirely, brought to the island through trade or conquest. Others believe it was created by a fringe culture, a group living parallel to the Minoans but speaking a completely different language that never survived into the archaeological record. And then there's another idea, more haunting. What if the disc wasn't meant for the people of its time? What if it was meant for someone in the future? Some scholars have pointed out that the spiral pattern is unusual for communication. Human languages typically run in lines, from left to right or top to bottom. Spirals are rare. Used in nature, yes, but not often in written language. It suggests a different kind of thinking, a different perspective. One not based on sentence structure, but cycles, time, energy, infinity. Could the disc be a map of some sort? A spiritual key? A forgotten technology? We simply don't know. Modern attempts to decode the disc have produced theories, but no consensus. Each new interpretation contradicts the last. Linguists argue, historians speculate, computer models suggest patterns, but never meaning. The truth is the Phaistos Disc seems designed to endure, but not necessarily to reveal. It was fired in clay, a medium built to survive thousands of years. Its symbols were stamped, not written, suggesting mass production, or perhaps a ritual so important it demanded precision. But why make something so deliberate, only to leave no explanation, unless the message wasn't meant for its creators, but for us? Maybe we were never supposed to understand it with our eyes. Maybe the Phaistos Disc is a riddle for the soul, an invitation, not a statement. And the language it speaks, we've simply forgotten how to hear. The more scholars have examined the Phaistos Disc, the more unsettling a possibility emerges, that it doesn't belong to any known linguistic family, not ancient Semitic, not Indo-European, not African, not Asian, not even proto-languages that predate recorded history. It speaks the language of none. Most languages leave trails, roots, offshoots, dialects, fragments, scratched into other artifacts or referenced in foreign texts. But the Phaistos symbols, they vanish. No linguistic tree, no descendants, not even a dead branch. This has led to a deeply uncomfortable question. Was this a language at all? Some theorists suggest the symbols might not represent words or sounds, but concepts, emotions, or sequences of thought. In other words, it might not be phonetic. It might be ideographic, like a kind of spiritual code designed to be felt, not spoken. That's where interpretations take a stranger turn. Certain researchers believe the disc represents a meditative tool, a journey inward, spiraling toward the center like a guided trance. They suggest the user was meant to trace the disc's path slowly, engaging with each symbol not as a word, but as a trigger. For memory, for imagination, for spiritual awakening, it wouldn't be the first time a civilization embedded meaning this way. Look at mandalas, labyrinths, ancient spiral stones like those on the Cochno surface. These aren't sentences. They're experiences, paths to follow, lessons to internalize. Still, others take it a step further, claiming the disc might be extra-linguistic, that is, created by beings who didn't use human forms of speech or writing at all. Not because they were alien necessarily, but because their consciousness operated differently. Symbols were their language, patterns were their voice. And here's the most fascinating part. The symbols on the disc repeat with an unnatural precision. It's almost mathematical, like a code, like data. As if the disc isn't a book, but a device, a message compressed into a form we haven't yet learned how to unlock. But here's the paradox. If it's a message, who sent it? If it's a code, what's the key? And if it was never meant to be read, what was it meant to awaken? Because sometimes language isn't something we learn, it's something that remembers us. Thousands of miles away from Crete, buried beneath the dry soil of the Peruvian desert, lies a very different kind of mystery. One that has sparked heated debate, scandal, and conspiracy. They're called the Ica stones, reportedly discovered near the town of Ica in the 1960s. These black andesite rocks, hard, smooth, and ancient-looking, bear carvings that defy everything we think we know about human history. Some stones depict complex surgical procedures, open heart operations, brain transplants, and the use of advanced tools. Others show ancient humans riding dinosaurs, observing the stars with telescopes, or interacting with creatures that no longer exist. It sounds impossible, because it is, at least according to mainstream science. The stones were first publicized by Dr. Javier Cabrera, a respected physician who became obsessed with them. He collected over 11,000 of these carved rocks, eventually founding a private museum to house them. According to Cabrera, they were the remnants of an advanced pre-flood civilization, one wiped out by catastrophe, long before our current understanding of recorded history. But very quickly, the story began to unravel. Local farmers who supplied the stones eventually confessed. They said they carved them themselves to sell to tourists. Under pressure, some even demonstrated their carving techniques, admitting they used knives, files, and sandpaper to fake the ancient appearance. Case closed? Not quite. Despite these confessions, many researchers and visitors pointed out something odd. The carvings on some stones had oxidation within the grooves, suggesting the etchings were not recent. Others displayed anatomical accuracy that seemed far beyond what the local hoaxers could have plausibly known. And then there's the sheer volume. Thousands of stones, many too detailed to be rushed fabrications. Could they all be fakes? Or did the hoax hide something real? That's the question that lingers. Some believe a handful of the stones may be authentic, and the flood of fakes was a clever way to discredit the entire collection. A controlled burn, bury the truth in plain sight, surrounded by enough noise to ensure no one would take it seriously again. So were the Ica stones just tourist souvenirs, or were they fragments of a forgotten civilization, screaming from beneath a layer of lies? Because sometimes when the truth is too dangerous, the easiest way to hide it is to turn it into a joke. When the Ica stones first came to light, they promised to rewrite history, but what followed was a whirlwind of controversy, manipulation, and the age-old question, can a truth be buried beneath a lie? The confession of the farmers, admitting to forging many of the stones, cast a long shadow over the entire collection. Skeptics felt vindicated. Scientists dismissed the stones as clever forgeries. Museums wanted nothing to do with them. But not everyone was convinced. For starters, the confessions were suspicious. Several farmers later claimed they were pressured by authorities to admit the stones were fakes, threatened with imprisonment under Peru's laws protecting antiquities. Some retracted their statements entirely, and then there's the issue of the stones themselves. Many of the so-called hoax stones feature incredibly precise anatomical drawings, cross-sections of human organs, complex surgeries, even cellular imagery, techniques that were not widely understood, even in the 1960s. A few show what appear to be genetic diagrams or tools resembling lasers and scalpels. Could a handful of untrained farmers really produce thousands of these detailed carvings, some on rocks harder than steel, using only hand tools? And what about the patina? Experts who studied certain stones under magnification found natural oxidation, aging in the grooves that would take centuries, if not millennia, to form. If the carvings were fresh, how did that happen? Still, no laboratory analysis has ever conclusively proven the stone's authenticity, and that's where the debate hangs. In limbo, suspended between possibility and impossibility. So what if the truth is more complicated? What if some of the stones were ancient and real, left behind by a civilization we no longer remember? And what if the fakes weren't designed to deceive, but to protect the originals? Flood the world with enough copies, and the real ones get lost in the noise. It wouldn't be the first time history was hidden by making it unbelievable. The Ica stones now sit in private collections on dusty shelves and in backrooms of forgotten museums. Dismissed, ignored, but never completely forgotten. Because whether real or fake, they ask a question few dare to answer. What if the past is not what we've been told? And what if someone or something has gone to great lengths to keep it that way? Stretching across nearly 200 square miles of the Peruvian desert, Just a few hours from the Ica stones lies a different kind of enigma, one so massive it can only be fully seen from the sky. These are the Nazca lines, enormous geoglyphs carved into the earth by removing the reddish-brown topsoil and revealing the pale layer beneath. There are over 800 straight lines, 300 geometric shapes, and more than 70 stylized figures, including hummingbirds, monkeys, spiders, and one particularly strange shape known only as the astronaut. What's most mysterious? The Nazca people had no flying machines, no balloons, no aerial perspective, and yet the figures are perfectly proportioned across hundreds of feet. Some lines stretch up to 12 miles long, laser straight through hills and valleys. How did they make them? And more importantly, why? Mainstream archaeologists suggest ceremonial or religious reasons, giant artworks made to please sky gods or invoke rainfall. The lines, they argue, are meant to be walked, not viewed, pathways for ancient rituals, but others see something far more calculated. Certain figures align with astronomical events, solstices, equinoxes, star risings. Some lines point directly to mountain springs or underground water sources, suggesting a kind of spiritual map of survival. Then there's the theory that refuses to go away. The Nazca lines look like runways, long, flat strips with no discernible purpose. Some are so perfectly straight they appear machine-made. From the air, the shapes come alive, not just as art, but as messages. Were they made for the gods, or for something watching from above? Ancient astronaut theorists believe the Nazca people may have had contact with visitors from the sky, and the geoglyphs were signals, a form of communication using symbols that could only be appreciated by those flying overhead. And then there's the astronaut, a bulbous-headed, wide-eyed figure carved into the side of a mountain, waving toward the heavens. It doesn't look like anything from local mythology. It doesn't fit the style of the animals or shapes around it. It looks deliberate, observant, other. Whether ceremonial, astronomical, or extraterrestrial, the Nazca lines remain one of the greatest unsolved codes carved into the earth. A message written large, not for those who walk the land, but for those who once flew over it. Among the dozens of figures etched into the Nazca Desert, one in particular stands out, not for its beauty, but for its strangeness. It's often called the hummingbird due to its long, needle-thin beak and extended wings. But take a closer look and it becomes clear. This creature doesn't resemble any hummingbird alive today. Its proportions are wrong. Its body is thick and compact. The tail feathers splay out like the exhaust of an engine. And the wings? They're broad, angular, unnatural, more mechanical than organic. It has no match in the animal kingdom. Not now. Not in ancient South America. Not anywhere. Some researchers have nicknamed it the Thunderbird, borrowing from Native American mythology, legendary flying creatures said to wield lightning and shake the ground with their wings. But even that comparison doesn't fully explain what we're looking at here. What if it's not a bird at all? Some theorists propose that the Nazca bird is a stylized representation of a flying machine, something the people of the time didn't understand, and so depicted it using the closest symbol they had, a bird. Its long beak could easily be a nose cone. Its wings, stabilizers. Its splayed tail, a propulsion system. And its large rounded head, drawn disproportionately bigger than the rest, almost like a cockpit. The more you look, the more it feels like the artist wasn't just drawing from imagination, but from memory, as if they saw something in the sky, something vast, powerful, and unlike anything they'd ever witnessed, something they couldn't explain. So they carved it into the ground, hoping it would one day make sense to someone. Could it be a bird stylized through ritual and abstraction? Certainly. But the fact that it can only be truly seen from high above, that it was never meant for the eyes of humans on foot, raises a question we keep returning to. Who was it made for? And if it was a symbol for communication, not worship, then the hummingbird becomes something else entirely, not a creature of earth, but a message to the sky, because sometimes the past doesn't whisper in caves or books. Sometimes It draws a giant picture and waits for us to look down and finally understand. Far from the dry deserts of Peru, deep in the lush forests of New Hampshire, lies a mystery that few people have ever heard of. In 1872, while digging a fence post near the edge of Lake Winnipesaukee, workers stumbled upon something strange, an oval-shaped stone, about 4 inches tall, carved with mysterious symbols on every side. It became known, quite simply, as the Lake Winnipesaukee Mystery Stone. At first glance, it looks like an ordinary relic, smooth, dark, and polished to a glassy finish. But once you start examining the symbols, questions pile up quickly. One side shows a face, broad, solemn, almost mask-like. Another side depicts a circle with spokes, like a sun or wheel. There are arrows, geometric shapes, zigzags, and what appear to be letters, but no alphabet anyone recognizes. Experts have debated its origin for over a century. Some suggested it was created by Native Americans. Others proposed it might be an early settler's artifact, or even a hoax. But the more closely it's examined, the stranger it becomes. For one, the level of craftsmanship is exceptional. The stone is made from quartzite, an incredibly hard material, and the engravings were likely made using metal tools, long before such technology was available in the area. More perplexing is how the stone was found. Buried 6 feet underground, encased in solid clay with no other objects nearby. If it had been dropped or lost recently, it wouldn't have been that deep. But if it really had been buried for centuries or longer, then who made it, and for what purpose? Some speculate it was a diplomatic gift given between ancient peoples. Others believe it was a spiritual object used in ceremonies or celestial tracking. And then there are those who suggest a more controversial idea, that it was left behind, not by us, but by someone before us. The markings don't match any known ancient culture in the Americas or anywhere else. No similar objects have ever been found. It's as if the stone was meant to be found, and yet gives us nothing. No context, no explanation. It remains on display in a small museum in New Hampshire, quiet, ignored by most, and still unsolved. A whisper beneath the earth, a message we're not ready to read. The Lake Winnipesaukee Mystery Stone is strange enough for its symbols, but what truly puzzles researchers is how it was made. At first glance, it looks handcrafted, polished, purposeful, but under closer inspection, something becomes apparent and unsettling. There are no visible tool marks. Modern stoneworkers who've examined the artifact have said that carving into quartzite is no easy task. It requires tools harder than the stone itself, such as diamond or hardened steel. Yet this artifact was supposedly created long before such tools existed in North America, especially among the local tribes of the time. So how was it done? The carvings are clean, symmetrical, shallow but deliberate. The surface isn't chipped or cracked. There's no sign of chiseling, no scratches from scraping. It's as if the symbols were etched using precision machinery, or perhaps something else, something we don't yet understand. One theory is that the stone was created using abrasive sand and patience, an ancient technique. But even if that were true, it doesn't explain the perfect consistency of the lines, the flawless polish, or the uniform depth of each engraving. It's not just old, it's impossibly clean. X-rays taken in the 1990s revealed something even stranger. The stone has 2 holes drilled into each end. Inside one, researchers found a tiny metal pin, completely sealed within the stone, not inserted later, not hammered in. It was embedded during the stone's creation. What kind of technology could allow for a metal component to be suspended inside a solid piece of quartzite? That discovery led to even more speculation. Was the stone some kind of ancient device? A container? A message capsule? Was it meant to be opened, or never opened at all? Some say it was ceremonial, others suggest it was extraterrestrial. A few believe it's a remnant of a civilization that predates our known history. Perhaps one that used tools and techniques now lost to time. But no theory explains it all. The symbols, the polish, the missing tool marks, the metal sealed inside. The Lake Winnipesaukee stone isn't just mysterious because of what's on its surface. It's mysterious because it shouldn't exist at all. And sometimes that's the clearest sign of all, that what we think we know isn't even close. Easter Island is famous for its towering stone heads, the moai, stoic figures staring out to sea as if waiting for something or someone. But hidden in the shadow of those statues lies a lesser-known yet equally mysterious puzzle, a language no one has ever decoded. It's called Rongorongo. Carved into wooden tablets with a stylus or shark tooth, Rongorongo isn't a spoken language. It's a system of glyphs, stylized symbols of humans, plants, animals, and abstract shapes. There are dozens of tablets, staffs, and artifacts bearing these inscriptions, but no one alive today knows how to read them. What makes Rongorongo truly strange is that it's completely unique. It doesn't resemble any known script in Polynesia or anywhere else. It seems to have emerged independently. Scholars have searched for links to other writing systems, Mayan, Egyptian, even Sumerian, but nothing fits. And then there's how it's written. Rongorongo is inscribed in a rare method called reverse boustrophedon, where the direction of writing alternates every line, and the symbols are rotated 180 degrees with each turn. It's complex, elegant, and unnatural for cultures with no written tradition. So how did it get there? One theory suggests the Rapa Nui people developed Rongorongo on their own in isolation, possibly to record genealogies, rituals, or astronomical events. But this raises a problem. How did a society that carved its history in stone suddenly develop such an advanced written system out of nowhere? Another idea is even more unsettling. Some believe the script was inherited, a memory from a time before the collapse of a lost civilization. Or perhaps it was given, a gift of knowledge passed down from visitors not native to Earth. There's also the issue of timing. When Europeans first arrived in the 1700s, no one on the island could read Rongorongo. The knowledge had already vanished. Oral traditions suggest a time of catastrophe, disease, war, or perhaps something stranger, when the keepers of the knowledge were lost forever. Now only 27 known objects with Rongorongo remain, scattered across museums, locked behind glass, fading with time, a language with no speaker, a message with no audience, and a story that may never be told. Sometimes silence is louder than words, and sometimes writing survives not to be read, but to remind us that someone once knew how. We know Easter Island for its giants, the moai statues. Silent, monolithic, standing with their backs to the sea and their gaze fixed inland, as if watching over something that's long since been forgotten. But what if they weren't just guardians? What if they were readers? It may sound strange, statues reading a language, but let's take a closer look. The Rongorongo script, mysterious and undeciphered, is believed to have been used in rituals, prayers, and possibly even astronomical observations. And where were many of these rituals conducted? Near the moai. The Rapa Nui people believed their ancestors' spirits lived within the statues. The moai weren't just carvings, they were vessels. They represented lineage, knowledge, and power. So when leaders gathered in ceremonial sites, it's possible they used Rongorongo in the presence of the moai, not just as decoration or record-keeping, but as communication between worlds. Some of the glyphs even resemble the statues themselves, elongated heads, bent knees, angular profiles. Could the Rongorongo script have been a dialogue with the ancestors? A coded message meant for the spirits within the stone? Then there's the location. Most of the surviving Rongorongo artifacts were found buried, hidden in caves, tucked away in coastal dwellings, or discovered in sacred ceremonial sites. Why hide them? Because by the time Europeans arrived, something had gone wrong. The island had suffered ecological collapse. Trees were gone. Food was scarce. Civil unrest and internal warfare followed. Oral history speaks of a dark time, the breaking of the old ways. And with that collapse, the keepers of the script, the scribes and priests, were either killed or silenced. The knowledge, the language, and its meaning lost. But the Moai remained. They endured long after the words faded, long after the rituals ended. Watching, listening. Some researchers now wonder, could the layout of the statues, how they're positioned, where they face, how they cluster, form part of a larger code? Were the statues not just spiritual icons, but physical extensions of the Rongorongo system? A language carved in wood, a message cast in stone. Perhaps the Moai aren't guarding the island at all. Perhaps they're waiting for someone who remembers how to listen, because maybe they've been reading and waiting this whole time. Just outside the shadow of Egypt's mighty pyramids lies a place few tourists ever visit. It's not as tall, not as grand, but to some it might be even more important. It's called Abu Ghurab. Tucked near the ancient city of Abu Sir, this site once held one of the sun temples of the 5th dynasty, built not for gods of war or death, but for the sun itself. And what remains is more than ruins. It may be a map written in stone. The centerpiece is a massive alabaster platform, perfectly smooth, polished like glass, and positioned to align with specific celestial movements. Nearby, deep channels carved into stone led outward in precise directions, many pointing to the cardinal directions, and more curiously, to known star constellations. Unlike other temples, Abu Ghurab wasn't about tombs or pharaohs. It was about light, and possibly contact. Some researchers believe this site wasn't a place of worship. It was an energy center, a kind of machine. The alabaster platform may have served as a resonating surface, capable of channeling solar energy or vibrational frequencies. That's not fantasy. It's grounded in material science. Alabaster, under certain conditions, can amplify sound and light vibrations. But amplify them for what? Ancient texts speak of solar boats, vehicles the gods used to travel the skies. Carvings from the site show beings holding what look like tuning forks, antennas, or energy rods. Some say these were metaphors. Others aren't so sure. Then there's the layout. When overlaid with star charts, Abu Ghurab seems to mirror the constellation of Orion, just like the pyramids at Giza. But here, the match is even more precise, suggesting not just symbolic alignment, but functional positioning. Could this have been a landing site, a beacon, or something more esoteric? A way to connect with intelligences beyond our world, not physically, but through vibration, resonance, and light? We may never know. But the design is too purposeful to ignore. Buried beneath sand, nearly forgotten by time, Abu Ghurab still hums with mystery, not shouting its secrets, just humming, softly, waiting. Because maybe it wasn't just built to honor the stars, but to speak to them. When people think of ancient Egypt, they picture towering pyramids, golden tombs, and hieroglyphs carved into endless walls of stone. But hidden among those hieroglyphs, tucked quietly into the corners of temples and chambers, are images that shouldn't exist. One of the most debated examples is found in the temple of Seti I in Abydos. There, on a stone beam above a doorway, are carvings that look like machines. Not just chariots or boats, but something else. Shapes that resemble a helicopter, a submarine, a jet, and even a kind of flying saucer. At first glance, they seem like an illusion. Some strange overlap of symbols. But look closer, and the shapes become undeniable. Blades, fuselages, cockpits, structures far too specific, too symmetrical to be random. Theories immediately swirled. Some Egyptologists claimed it was a result of palimpsest carving, where hieroglyphs were recarved over old ones, causing visual overlaps. Others suggested erosion or intentional reworking during later dynasties. That explanation may be technically sound, but it doesn't fully satisfy. Because these accidental shapes don't just look like something mechanical. They look modern. They mimic technology we didn't develop until the 20th century. And they raise a much larger question. Why do so many ancient civilizations include references to flying craft, sky visitors, or beings descending from above? It's not just Abydos. Other temples, including Dendera and Karnak, show images that resemble electrical devices, energy transmitters, even light bulbs. Some researchers suggest the ancient Egyptians understood electromagnetism, or at least something that produced and harnessed power. But where would that knowledge come from? Mainstream historians argue that such interpretations are a stretch, misreadings of symbolic art. But for those who look deeper, the symbolism is only part of the story. It's the patterns that matter, repeated shapes, recurring themes, the same skyward gestures in different eras, and images that mirror modern machines carved into stone over 3,000 years ago. Could it be coincidence? Or are these echoes of something once real, now lost? Maybe Egypt's temples weren't just monuments to gods, but messages to those who once came from above, or those who might return. Because the pyramids were never the end of the mystery. They were only the beginning. Across the vast landscape of India, from ancient stone temples to palm leaf manuscripts, there exist cryptic passages, inscriptions that hint at knowledge far beyond their time. Some of these writings speak of vimanas, flying machines described in detail in sacred texts like the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. These weren't metaphorical chariots of the gods. They were mechanical, metallic, capable of vertical lift, changing direction mid-air, and traveling great distances, even between worlds. One ancient Sanskrit text, the Vaimanika Shastra, outlines technical blueprints, propulsion systems, pilot gear, alloys used in construction. The descriptions are precise, scientific. Not the language of poets or priests, but of engineers. It's almost too incredible to believe, and maybe that's the point. Many of these inscriptions, especially the most detailed ones, have not survived. Some were lost in fires, others vanished during colonial excavations, still others were destroyed during political upheaval or deemed unworthy of preservation, written off as mythology, but pieces remain. Engravings in temples depict strange, bell-shaped craft hovering above human figures. Inscriptions speak of wars fought not just on land but in the skies, with weapons that sound eerily modern, beams of light, explosive arrows, smoke that makes men forget. Some scholars have proposed that these are merely metaphors, early humans trying to make sense of natural phenomena, like comets or thunderstorms. But others see too much precision, too much pattern. They believe these texts are fragments of memory, echoes of a time when humanity may have known more than we do now. Or perhaps a time when we shared the sky with something else. And what about the knowledge that didn't survive? The pages that burned, the scrolls that disappeared, the libraries looted or lost. One of the greatest libraries in ancient India, Nalanda, was said to contain hundreds of thousands of texts, including celestial charts and mechanical diagrams. It was destroyed in the 12th century. The fire is said to have burned for months. We'll never know what was lost. But maybe that's why some inscriptions feel incomplete, as if they were only part of a much larger picture, a blueprint, a history, or maybe a warning. And all that's left are ashes. Ashes that once spoke to the stars. In nearly every corner of the world, from South America to the Middle East, Africa to Asia, we find traces, symbols carved in stone, inscriptions without meaning, languages no one remembers. They appear isolated, disconnected. But what if they're not? What if these symbols, these scattered whispers etched into cave walls, megaliths, discs, and tablets, are the remnants of a forgotten civilization, one not recorded in textbooks or timelines, one that existed long before our known history even began, a civilization that whispered, not shouted. There are myths, after all, shared by cultures oceans apart, of a great flood, a sudden darkness, or a time when the gods walked among men. The Sumerians called it the time of the Anunnaki. Hindu texts refer to Manvantara cycles, where knowledge rises and falls like tides. Native American legends speak of previous worlds, destroyed and reborn. These aren't just bedtime stories. They're memories. Memories dressed as myths. And if this civilization existed, highly intelligent, spiritually advanced, maybe even technologically superior, its greatest accomplishment may not have been towering monuments or world-spanning empires. It may have been knowing when to disappear. Unlike us, they didn't leave skyscrapers or satellites. They didn't write user manuals or history books. They encoded their knowledge in patterns, in resonance, in symbols designed to outlive languages, cultures, and even memory itself. A spiral here, a star map there. A disc no one can read. A stone that speaks without words. Some believe these weren't just fragments of a lost people, but deliberate seeds planted for future generations. For us. Not meant to be immediately understood, but discovered slowly, piece by piece, when we were ready. If true, it explains why the messages feel just out of reach, why they resonate but don't translate, why so many remain unsolved, not because they're flawed, but because we're not yet fluent in the language of the past. And if that civilization is watching somewhere on another plane, or simply from the pages of forgotten time, then perhaps they are waiting too. Waiting for us to put the puzzle together, to stop looking for gods or aliens, and finally recognize that we were never the first, just the next. After exploring so many ancient symbols, strange inscriptions, undeciphered texts, and carvings that seem to transcend time, a haunting thought begins to take shape. What if these messages weren't meant for us at all? We study them, we theorize, we compare glyphs to alphabets, rocks to calendars, carvings to constellations. But still, they don't make sense, not fully. Every breakthrough seems to lead to a dead end. Every discovery feels like part of a much larger story we're not invited to read. And maybe that's the point. Imagine a message left behind, not for a future civilization, but for a specific kind of mind, one more advanced, or more intuitive, or simply different, not bound by language, culture, or human perception. These inscriptions may not be intended for our current understanding at all. Maybe they were planted like time-locked artifacts, meant to activate only when human consciousness evolves. Not just in technology, but in awareness. Perhaps we're looking with the wrong eyes, reading with the wrong questions. Because what if the true audience of these symbols hasn't arrived yet? We assume ancient carvings were made to be seen by us. Modern humans with microscopes and theories and satellite imaging. But maybe the creators were speaking to something else. Maybe their audience lives in the sky, or deep within the earth, or in dimensions we haven't yet learned to measure. That changes everything. A carving in stone might not be history. It might be a beacon. A disc might not be a story. It could be a transmission. A spiral on the ground might not be art. It might be a door. And we, curious, stumbling, brilliant and blind, may simply be eavesdropping. We decode what we can, guess at the rest, and assume we're the center of the conversation. But maybe we're just bystanders, picking up the fragments of a conversation not meant for human ears. If that's true, then the mystery isn't just what these symbols mean. The real mystery is who they were meant for, and whether one day that intended audience will return to read what we could not, to answer what we only asked in wonder. After all the stones and spirals, manuscripts and monuments, unanswered questions and forgotten tongues, one quiet truth lingers. The universe has always spoken in symbols. Long before we had alphabets, we carved spirals into caves. We drew suns, animals, and stars on walls. We aligned temples to the solstice. We etched lines across deserts so vast they could only be seen from the sky. We weren't just surviving, we were speaking. But maybe we weren't speaking to each other. Maybe we were responding to something greater, something timeless, something just out of reach. These ancient symbols we've explored tonight, they may not all come from the same culture or time or continent, and yet they echo one another. Spirals in Scotland, stars in Egypt, discs in Tibet, birds in Peru, and scripts that appear nowhere else. Coincidence or continuity? If a lost civilization once walked this earth, maybe they didn't leave behind technology, but seeds, clues, codes. A message that could only be read by those who learned how to slow down and see not with their eyes, but with their intuition. Or perhaps the message was never lost. It's just been waiting for us to grow into it. Because to understand symbols is to understand pattern, rhythm, connection. It's to remember that knowledge isn't always in words. It can be in shape, sound, vibration, or silence. And perhaps that's the message behind all of it. That everything is connected. That time is not linear. That we are not alone. That we never were. So maybe the real mystery isn't whether these symbols were messages from gods, aliens, or forgotten cultures. Maybe the real mystery is that they still move us. That deep down, something inside us recognizes them, even if we can't explain why. A spiral feels familiar. A star map draws us closer. A forgotten word on a broken tablet somehow feels like home. And maybe that's the only translation we need, because some symbols weren't meant to be read. They were meant to be remembered. And tonight, maybe we've started to.